Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi there, Herman and Corin. So many of us grew up with parents, or the images on TV of a father who spent 20 or 30 years climbing the corporate ladder at a major company and then retiring with a golden watch. And it seemed like a very idyllic world. Not only could those single-income families often miraculously afford to buy a very nice home, but the breadwinner had a stable career. It seemed a little bit boring. We often sometimes see in TV depictions, the exhausted father coming home with his briefcase and collapsing on the couch. But there was, at least on the plus side, a lot of stability to that picture. Today we have a radically different employment landscape where it's become the norm for people to have much shorter tenures, for careers to involve various pivots and reinventions, and for careers to be a lot less linear. And I think that has pros for sure. It's a more diverse and exciting, and the average employee is going to have more experiences over the course of their career, but it also creates a lot less of that stability. What I'd like to ask you, Herman and Corin, is it's been a while since I was in the employed side of the picture. I'm self-employed currently. So I'd love to get a sense for what tenures are like these days, because I'm 36 for reference. And when I was starting out my career, especially here in Israel, your entry-level job, it was sort of 1 year was kind of about where you could put that on your CV if you had a shorter stint, which many people do. It just didn't work out. That was kind of left off. And then, I'm taking a complete guess as to when I say what I kind of would peg your average mid-career job at, maybe 3 to 4 years. But again, I'm just totally guessing that. Herman and Corin, what does the data actually say? Have we reached a point of peak instability where people are moving around, or do we actually see a trend back in the other direction? Of course, we can't talk about the global job market as a gigantic and very big place, but let's talk about the US as a good bellwether. And other places here in Israel, there's less data about that, but it is an interesting question. Herman and Corin, do you think we will ever return to those days of the single employer trajectory? And let's not also forget that that's not a thing of the past. Much as there are industries where rapidly shifting employer is the norm, there are industries that are still more biased towards working with 1 or 2 employers for very long-term projects, especially those where moving around in the industry might be a lot harder. And I think it would be good to talk about those industries as well, where the average employee retention is significantly higher than what might be seen in other parts of the economy. Herman and Corin, let's talk about duration of employment and what the evolution of a career looks like now in 2026 on today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corin, and I am sitting here in our living room in Jerusalem with my brother,
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. It is a beautiful day outside, but we are inside, ready to dive into some data.
We really are. Our housemate Daniel sent us a voice note this morning that got us both thinking. He was reminiscing about that old image of the career man, the person who starts at a company at 22 and retires 40 years later with a gold watch and a pension.
The classic mid-century dream, or nightmare, depending on how much you like your coworkers, I suppose.
Exactly. Daniel was asking if that is completely dead, or if we are just in a temporary state of chaos. He wanted to know about the current state of employment tenure, and how these career trajectories have shifted into what he called non-linear paths.
It is a great question because there is a lot of myth-making around this. People often say, oh, nobody stays at a job for more than a year anymore, or the gig economy has destroyed the stable career. But when you actually look at the numbers, the reality is a bit more nuanced than the headlines suggest.
Well, let us start there then. What does the data actually tell us? If we look at the United States first, what is the median tenure for a worker today?
So, the latest figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that the median tenure for wage and salary workers is about 4.6 years. What is interesting is that this number has been remarkably stable for the last decade. Back in January of 2014, it was also about 4.6 years.
4.6 years? That feels like a long time if you are in the tech world, but a short time if you are thinking about that 40-year career. Does that vary a lot by age? I imagine the 20-somethings are dragging that average down.
Oh, absolutely. The age gap is massive. For workers aged 55 to 64, the median tenure is about 10.3 years, almost a decade plus. But for workers aged 25 to 34, it drops down to about 2.7 years. It makes sense, right? When you are young, you are exploring, you are trying to find the right fit, and you are often jumping for those early career salary bumps.
Right. And in your 20s, a 2-year stint feels like an epoch. When you are 50, 2 years is just a couple of budget cycles. But let us talk about Israel for a second. Since we are sitting here in Jerusalem, the high-tech scene here is famous for its volatility. But does it follow the same pattern?
Israel is a fascinating case study because you have this clash of cultures. On one hand, you have the old-school institutional loyalty that came out of the socialist roots of the state, like the big utility companies or the defense sector. In those places, you still see people staying for 20 or 30 years. But then you have the Silicon Wadi, the high-tech hub.
And there, the turnover is legendary.
It is. But even there, we have seen some cooling off. A few years ago, it felt like people were changing jobs every 18 months just because a recruiter breathed in their direction. But recently, as the market has matured and companies are focusing more on profitability over pure growth, we are seeing a bit more caution. People are looking for stability. They are looking for companies that have a clear path forward, rather than just the next venture capital round.
That brings up Daniel's point about peak instability. Have we reached a plateau? Are we going to see a return to longer tenures? Or is the 3-year hop the new permanent normal?
I think we are at a point of stabilization, but at a lower baseline than our parents' generation. The social contract has changed, Korn. In the 1950s and 60s, there was an implicit agreement: you give us your loyalty, and we give you a pension and job security. That contract was torn up in the 1980s and 90s with the rise of shareholder primacy and mass layoffs.
And once the companies stop being loyal to the employees stop being loyal to the companies. It is a rational response to a changed environment.
Exactly. If you know that you could be part of a 10% reduction in force next Tuesday, regardless of your performance, why wouldn't you keep your options open? Why wouldn't you take that 20% raise at the competitor?
It is funny you mentioned the reduction in force. We talked about this a bit in episode 397, when we looked at how artificial intelligence is hollowing out the middle of the career ladder. If the middle rungs are missing, you have to jump to a different ladder entirely to keep climbing.
That is a perfect connection. The nonlinear path Daniel mentioned isn't always a choice. It is often a necessity. If your company doesn't have a clear internal promotion track because those middle management roles are being automated or flattened, you have to move out to move up.
So, if the median is 4.6 years, what industries are actually keeping people? Who is still getting the gold watches?
It is mostly the public sector and heavy industry. In the United States, the median tenure for government employees is around 6.8 years. That is significantly higher than the private sector median of about 4.1 years. Manufacturing also tends to have higher tenure, around 5.5 years, because the skills are often very specific to that company's machinery or processes.
What about the tech giants? You hear stories about people at places like Google or Nvidia who have been there since the early days.
Those are the outliers. Even at the big firms, the median tenure is often surprisingly low, sometimes around 2 or 3 years. But that is skewed by the fact that they are hiring so many new people. If you hire 10,000 people this year, your average tenure is going to look low even if your veterans are staying forever.
That is a good point about the math, but I want to go deeper on the psychological side of this. If we are moving from job to job every few years, what does that do to our sense of professional identity? We used to be a Boeing engineer or a New York Times journalist. Now, we are a software architect who happens to be at a fintech startup this year.
It shifts the identity from the institution to the craft. You are a writer or a coder or a marketer, and the company is just the current venue for your work. It is a very different way of moving through the world. It requires a lot more self-management. You are the CEO of your own career, which sounds empowering, but it is also exhausting.
It really is. You have to handle your own upskilling, your own networking, and in many places, your own retirement planning. We touched on this in episode 324 when we discussed why we are still so overworked, despite all this productivity technology. The overhead of managing a fragmented career is a full-time job in itself.
And let us not forget the impact on teams. If you are a manager and you know that half your team will be gone in 36 months, how much do you invest in their long-term development? How much do you care about the deep culture of the team?
It creates this transactional atmosphere. I'll give you my best word for 2 years. You give me a good salary and a brand name on my resume, and then we both move on. No hard feelings. But you lose that deep institutional knowledge. You lose the people who remember why a certain decision was made 10 years ago.
I see that in the high-tech sector here in Israel all the time. Companies are constantly reinventing the wheel because the person who built the original wheel left for a startup in Tel Aviv 6 months ago. It is a massive hidden cost to the economy.
So, do you think we will ever see a return to the single-employer model? Or is that just a historical anomaly of the post-war era?
I think the 40-year career was the anomaly. If you look at human history before the Industrial Revolution, people had very fluid, multifaceted roles. You were a farmer, but you were also a builder, and maybe a trader. The idea of being a cog in a single corporate machine for your entire adult life is actually a relatively new and perhaps brief experiment.
That is a perspective I hadn't considered. So, the non-linear path is actually a return to form.
In a way, yes. We're moving toward what some people call the portfolio career. You might have a main job, a side project, and a few freelance clients, or you might spend 5 years in one industry and then completely pivot. The data shows that the average worker will hold 12 to 15 different jobs in their lifetime. That is a lot of transitions.
12 to 15 jobs. That is a lot of interviews, Herman. I am getting stressed just thinking about it.
Well, the good news is that we are getting better at it. The tools for job searching and the social acceptability of jumping have made it much easier. It used to be that if you had a gap in your resume or too many short stints, you were seen as a red flag. Now, if you've been at the same place for 15 years, some recruiters might actually wonder if you've become stagnant.
That is the flip side of the coin, isn't it? The penalty for loyalty.
It is a real thing. There is data suggesting that people who stay at the same company for more than a few years earn significantly less over their lifetime than those who switch. The loyalty discount is a harsh reality of the modern labor market.
So, what is the takeaway for our listeners? If you are sitting there in your 3rd year at a job and you are feeling that itch, is it just the statistics catching up with you?
I think the key is to be intentional. Don't leave just because the median says you should, but don't stay out of a false sense of loyalty to an institution that might not be loyal to you. The most successful people I see are those who treat their career like a series of projects. Each project should give you a new skill, a new network, or a new level of responsibility. When the project is finished, it is time to look for the next one, whether that is inside your current company or somewhere else.
And for the employers listening, how do you fight this? If you want to keep your best people, how do you beat the 4.6-year median?
You have to make the internal move as attractive as the external one. Most people leave because they want a new challenge or a raise. If you can provide those things without them having to change their email address, they might stay. But you have to be proactive. You can't wait for them to come to you with a competing offer. By then, it is usually too late.
It is about creating an internal marketplace for talent. We saw some of this in our discussion about remote work hubs in episode 345. When you decouple the job from the specific office, you open up more internal possibilities, but you also make it easier for them to work for anyone else in the world.
It is a double-edged sword. But that is the world we are living in. I don't think we are going back to the gold watch. I think we are going toward a world where the watch is something you buy yourself because you finally hit your goals as an independent professional.
That is a bit more solitary, but I suppose it is the reality of 2026. Herman, I want to talk about the concept of portable benefits before we wrap up, because if we are jumping around so much, things like health insurance and retirement savings become a nightmare to manage.
This is a huge policy debate right now. There is a lot of talk about decoupling benefits from the employer entirely. Imagine a system where your benefits follow you, not your job. You have a central account for your health, your pension, and your training budget, and every employer you work for contributes to it proportionally.
That would take so much of the friction out of the system. It would make that 12-job career much less terrifying.
It would, but it requires a massive shift in how we think about the role of the corporation in society. We are still using a system designed for that 1950s model, even though the labor market has moved on.
It is like trying to run modern software on a computer from 40 years ago. It kind of works, but it is slow and it crashes all the time.
Exactly. And the crashes are what we see as career burnouts or long periods of unemployment between roles.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at the data. It is reassuring in a way to know that the world isn't as chaotic as it feels, but also a reminder that the old stability is gone.
It is a different kind of stability, Korn. It is the stability of your own skills and your own adaptability. That is the only thing you can really count on.
Well said. Before we sign off, I want to say a huge thank you to Daniel for the prompt. It really sparked a great conversation here.
Definitely. And hey, if you are listening and you found this helpful, or if you have your own thoughts on the 4-year itch, we would love to hear from you.
Also, if you could take a second to leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify, it would mean a lot. It really helps other people find the show and keeps us going.
It genuinely does. We check those reviews more often than we probably should.
You can find all our past episodes, including the ones we mentioned today, at myweirdprompts.com. There is a full archive there and a contact form if you want to send us a prompt of your own.
We are also on Spotify, so make sure to follow us there so you never miss an episode.
Alright, that is it for today. Thanks for joining us on My Weird Prompts. I am Korn.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. We will see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
So, Korn, how long have you been at this podcasting gig now?
Oh, since the beginning, Herman. I think I am well past the median tenure at this point.
Does that mean you are looking for a 20% raise?
I'll talk to the house manager about it.
Good luck with that. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So, thinking about the Israel data again, did you see that report about the defense sector? They were saying that even there, the younger generation is starting to push for shorter contracts. They want the prestige of having served in those elite units, but they don't necessarily want to stay until they are 55.
It is the same thing we talked about with the brand name on the resume. Spend 3 years in Unit 8200, and you are set for life in the private sector. The military is becoming the ultimate elite university and first employer combined.
And that creates a huge brain drain for the state. If all your best cyber experts leave at 25 to start a fintech company, how do you maintain your national security infrastructure?
You have to change the model. You have to make the mission more compelling than the stock options. Or you have to find a way to let them do both. We're seeing more of these hybrid roles where people split their time between the public and private sectors.
That is the ultimate nonlinear path, afoot in both worlds.
It might be the only way to keep the system running. Anyway, we should probably let people get back to their jobs, or their job searches.
Right, until next time.
See ya.
Wait, did I mention the manufacturing tenure was 5.5 years? I should have double-checked if that was for durable or non-durable goods.
Herman, let it go. We are done.
I just want to be precise.
You were precise enough. Let's go get some coffee.
Fine. Coffee it is.
My Weird Prompts is a production of 3 guys in a house in Jerusalem. Thanks for listening.
And thanks for being part of our community. We really appreciate you.
Seriously. Bye for real now.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.